I hope you're a bit more progressive in answering me on this one. Taoiseach, the Danish government decided last week to leave the Energy Charter Treaty. They join a growing list of European countries that have left the treaty. 8 European countries have declared intentions to leave, and 15 EU member states, at least 60% of the EU population, are needed for the EU to withdraw from the treaty, and final talks are ongoing at the moment. The treaty has been described as a threat to climate action by civil society groups and UN experts, and violates the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement by offering legal protection to climate-wrecking fossil fuel companies. This treaty allows fossil fuel companies to sue governments due to reduced profits because of environmental reforms and climate action. The most notorious case is the suing of the Netherlands for €2 billion by German giants RWE and Uniper for the Netherlands' decision to phase out coal. We are in the middle of a climate catastrophe, and our government, which contains a so-called Green Party, cannot support a decision to leave a treaty that allows giant corporations, which are already making billions in extra profit due to price gouging and greed, to sue governments for essential moves such as phasing out fossil fuels such as coal. Coal, one of the fossil fuels most deadly to the planet, and we're allowing corporations with billions in profits to sue countries over its phasing out. It's a joke. In 2001, the IPCC said that we're protecting $2.15 trillion in profits for these energy companies. We've seen this time and time again with the treaties such as CETA and TTIP. This government seems wed to the idea that giant companies with multi-billion profit lines, which grow year by year, should have the right to sue our government for implementing reforms to protect our citizens and this planet from the harms of climate change and the profit and the greed of neoliberal capitalism. Minister Ryan has stated that Ireland would support an EU decision to leave the treaty, and our geography and our educated workforce offers us one of the greatest opportunities to lead on new green technologies and policies. We can't be sued for that by developing those policies, because it's eaten into the profits of these companies. But more than that, year by year, and one IPCC report after another IPCC report stating that this world is hurtling to a world disaster of unmanageable proportions. Scientists and experts are talking about societal and economic collapse on a scale not seen in modern times. People all over the world are already dying because of the climate catastrophe, and this treaty is in direct opposition to taking action on this disaster. Utter failure and ecocide, that is what experts call this treaty. Will this government commit to now leaving the treaty, or will you continue to support a treaty that values the profits of massive corporations over the lives of every single person who lives on this planet?
Could I just say to the Deputy, first of all, I think in terms of the government's position in respect of climate, I think there's no question that in the last 2.5 years, I would argue that legislatively and in terms of actions taken by the government, there's been quite a watershed in Ireland's response to the climate crisis. But our response, without question, and I think will have impact in the years to come. In terms of, and yes, because one of the challenges we have as a population, we're growing. I mean, we've gone from less than 3.5 million in the early 1990s to 5.2 million today. And I think that's a factor across public services, housing, but also climate and economic growth to maintain that population and support that population creates its own challenges for us in terms of climate change. But Europe is very clear, and I've been at the European Council in terms of the targets for 2030 and 2050, but more critically, to reduce dependency on fossil fuels. And the war in Ukraine has accelerated the move by the end of the decade to reduce dependency on coal, on energy and so on. Now, in the shorter term, because of the crisis brought about by the war in Ukraine, some countries are moving back, unfortunately, to coal and so forth. From our perspective, we need to double down in terms of wind energy and offshore wind energy, as well as additional onshore wind energy, to really eliminate our dependency on fossil fuels over time. And in terms of a specific treaty, I think we have signed up and for the Fit for 55 within the European Union, and we as a country ourselves have set very challenging targets, extremely challenging targets in respecting climate. And I think, you said the so-called Green Party. I think the Green Party have made a significant contribution to this agenda. And the programme for government is very clear. both in terms of the climate issue and the biodiversity crisis. We want to move from the fossil fuel area. The challenge will be, as population grows, how fast can we do it? And how can we, through planning systems and so on, get both onshore and offshore wind proposals through? Because we have choices to make as a society. And we don't actually, I would argue, have the luxury to oppose all forms of energy development. And people have rights and entitlements in communities and so on, but given the nature of the crisis, I support the view of the European Union, the President of the Commission, that in respect of offshore wind, for example, we need an overriding public interest clause, that the crisis in climate should override other considerations once we've fully considered people's concerns, and then we should be in a position to accelerate and to pass through the planning process.
Thank you,
Vital infrastructure that will be required.
Deputy Collins.
Taoiseach, I'm no more enlightened than when I stood up 3 or 4 minutes ago. Germany, preceded by France, the Netherlands, Poland and Spain, have recently announced, and Luxembourg, have recently announced their intention to withdraw from the treaty, citing the Charter's incompatibility with the EU climate goals. Luxembourg said that this is what the Government Council has decided today, based on my proposition. The country's Energy Charter Minister Claude Toon said in a comments posted on Twitter, even if the modernisation of the Energy Charter Treaty leads to some progress, the treaty is still not compatible with the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, and it continues to protect investments in fossil and nuclear energies. So, Taoiseach, I'm asking your government to now come out and say that you're going to withdraw from this Energy Charter Treaty. It's protecting the profits of fossil fuel companies that are wrecking our climate, and we need 15 countries in the EU to announce they're going to pull out of it and pull out of it before the EU can pull out of it. And it was a commission in 2021 actually said that the EU should pull out of it, and I think we should be very, very strong in supporting our other fellow Europeans like Germany and France, Netherlands, Spain and those countries and pulling out of the Charter.
Yeah, our general approach has been to work in concert with the European Union collectively, and that will be our position in respect to the Energy Charter Treaty. In other words, we would like to do but there is moves afoot to modernise and reform the treaty, to make it compatible with the Paris Agreement and EU policies. And failing that, of course, we reserve the option to withdraw. In respect of any incompatibility with the treaty and our positions. But again, and Minister Ryan is on record as saying that he is working with others in terms of that modernisation and reform agenda, and that we reserve the option to withdraw if necessary. And he has real concerns, and we have real concerns in respect of the treaty and aspects of it in terms of its compatibility with the European Union's climate change agenda, which is a very far-seeing agenda, is the point I'm endeavouring to make earlier, that we sometimes get fixated on specific acts and so on. There is no doubt, in my view, that the direction of travel from the European Commission, from the European Union, and most members of the European Union, not all, but the vast majority, is towards net zero.